Alok, I discovered something as in the course of my research, which is that when you were at IIT, you were really interested in ethical hacking,
Yes, I was.
and that got you banned from the computer center at IIT Kanpur.
For a few months, yes.
What exactly were you doing? And tell me about the computer lab and tell me what the order or which professor called you up and told you that you're banned from the computer center.
So you're good with your research, Rohin. But I actually enjoyed discovering new technological uh, powers, let's put it that way. And this was, I think, the year 1998 or 1999. The internet was very new. We were the first batch at IIT Kanpur to actually even get email addresses and access. Me and a couple of friends used to hang around in the computer center figuring out how Linux works and how you could actually go around the system and do things. Although we never used it for doing anything nasty, but we once got caught, having root access to a machine.
I was about to say, were you trying to get root access? And then you said it.
Yes. Yeah, and I think we were out of the computer center for a couple of months because of that. But I think we also built a very good bond with the sysadmin there because of this incident. Yeah.
It seems like such a quaint concept, right? The entire concept of computer labs. Because I remember it back from school and from colleges where labs were a thing. You take off your shoes, go inside.
Yeah.
There was dedicated time, and it was really valuable because it was almost like, wow, in this time, this machine is mine and I can do whatever I want to do with it.
Yeah, those were the days. We used to get time slots where we could print batch jobs.
Yes. Yes. I remember my earliest memories of computer labs in school were where you had these dot matrix printers, and you had these software that would allow you to print banners on long running which you could stick up in your room.
Yes.
Right, so that
ASCII
was
art and all
that's right, ASCII art and all that. Well, I mean, those are another era. Well, so that was that. You getting banned from the IIT Kanpur computer lab for a few months. Second, your company, it's Ixigo, but the actual name for the company is Le Travenues. Does Le Travenues come because you were in the French Riviera for the first 5 years of your career?
Partially, yes. So actually, the story goes as follows. Rajneesh and I, we quit our jobs and came back to India 2006, and we were registering the company. And it so happened that the ROC did not like that we were just calling it Travenues Technology Limited. They said this is a generic name, although I had my view on that because Travenues is also travel plus avenues. But they said, please add something in the beginning to make it more unique. And we were left with a choice of what do we add, right? And we just come from France, and everything had a le or a la in front of it. So we just went with le, and the ROC approved it. So that's the story.
And this is the thing. I sometimes wonder what are these rules that the ROC is applying, because similar things have come up with the Ken as well when we try to apply, or even the earlier company that like they will always reject it for the reasons and this is too common. And then you're thinking, who else has this? Because I searched for it, I couldn't find anything.
Yeah.
And then you have to just add something to it, and then some random thing that you add in the spur of the moment ends up becoming a listed company like 20 years later.
Absolutely. And a lot of debate happened just before the DRHP filing that should we change the name, right? Because people were like, okay, now you could probably call it Ixigo Limited. But, I think at that time we said this name has carried us well so far. It's probably going to carry us well from here as well. So we decided to just continue living with it. And, in a way, we are a house of brands, house of companies in some sense, because we acquired also other businesses and brands. So this becomes also the mothership in that sense.
All right. French Riviera, Le Travenues, Aloke Bajpai, welcome to First Principles. Thank you so much for being here in Bangalore this December morning. I appreciate it. We've been trying to get together for this for a while. I'm finally glad that it happened, and actually happened in a time where it looks like the Indian travel sector is sort of going through this incredible churn on account of the meltdown that Indigo had. Ixigo listed last year and is doing really well on the stock markets. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell me, when did Ixigo? Next year, will you be 20 years old? Is that right? 2016 is when you started?
So we actually started working on the idea in 2006. So in that sense, yes, next year will be 20 years from the time we started working on it.
Sorry, 2006. I said
Yeah,
2016. My bad.
2006.
Yeah.
And we launched in 2007. So in that sense, 19 years from launch next year.
Interesting. I'm going to ask you some basic questions about Ixigo,
Okay.
right? Ixigo is, of course, a listed company. It's a travel company because that's how people see it from the outside. But how would you, what is Ixigo really as a company? How would you describe it?
I think Ixigo is born out of the passion to help travelers out in terms of the pain areas that exist right from the time you start thinking of a trip to while you're on it, right? So before, during, and after the trip, there's lots of pain and agony that travelers go through to sort out the smallest of things. And I think Ixigo is born out of the passion to help solve that. The avatar in which we've been solving it has obviously evolved over time, but the ethos remains the same, right? That we want to build the company that provides the best customer experience to travelers, right? And I think in that endeavor, we have obviously entered several categories in a very unique way. But if you think about the very long term, right, I think the companies that deserve to win are the ones that actually build the best customer experience in that space. And that's been the common sort of passion for all the Ixigems that are working on this.
Ixigems.
Yes.
What is that?
That's
Is
how we
that
call our employees.
Oh, okay. The reason I was asking is because you're also a house of brands. So I thought perhaps the brands are called Ixigems. But I get it. We'll come to this later because one of the running strands across all your conversations in the past has been the importance of culture and employees. So I totally get why they're called Ixigems. But let me come back to Ixigo. Give us a sense of Ixigo's scale right now.
Well, last year, almost 550 million annual active users, which means half of people who use internet in India actually used us at least once, would have used at least one of our apps or brands or platforms, at least once. And if I look at a monthly active number, we have more than 80 million monthly active users. We are doing transactions that are essentially now in terms of the number of passengers that we move around from one point to another in India across train, flight, bus, right? We'd be doing close to 150 million annualized, passengers that are being transported from point A to point B in India. So in that sense, we have significant penetration in the market. And in terms of downloads also, we have the most downloads in our space. So we've crossed more than 700 million downloads across our apps and continue to be the fastest growing, both in terms of usage and in terms of the transaction value that flows through us. So last quarter, we did close to 4,400 crores of gross transaction value. So on an annualized basis, you can think of it as about 17, 18,000 crores of annualized gross transaction value flowing through us.
You also have a very strong Bharat theme which runs across Ixigo. How would you explain that? How do you...
Yeah. So if you think about why we do what we do, one of the reasons is that we believe that the Western template of building an OTA was a bit flawed in the Indian context. Because if you look at the established norm on how online travel platforms globally got built, people would first launch a flight booking experience, whether on web or app, acquire users, and then they would sell hotels to make money. And this was an established norm in US, in Europe, even in India. The first batch of OTAs were doing just that. I think we realized at one point in our journey, and I think this was around 2012, 13, when mobile internet was taking off, that if you look at the penetration of air in the country, back then this was sub 3%. Today that number is close to 4.5% of the population that flies every year. If you look at even China, which is 37%, US is in the 80s, we are very underpenetrated as a market when it comes to air. What that means is that travel for an average Indian may not even relate to getting on a flight at all, right? And that was the insight that came to us while we were building this, and we realized that why is nobody building a train first OTA in the Indian context? Because the first port of call for any Indian to uh, go on any vacation journey, pilgrimage, etc., is to get on a train and then figure out after they reach there. Typically, they figure out their accommodation. This is how we all grew up. In our journeys, and I come from a tier 2 middle class
For me,
family.
the highlight of my childhood was summer vacations where we would travel from Delhi to Kerala by 2+ days, 2.5 days of train up and down. But it was essentially train all the way throughout childhood.
And it was a very joyous experience, right? As a child,
It was hot and humid and dusty, but it was joyous.
it was joyous. But there were also these moments of anxiety in that, right? You reached the station, you were asking the coolie which platform number your train was on.
And you're
then
scanning those papers which are pasted on each of those compartments saying, is it this?
Exactly.
Is it still on the wait list? Did
And
it
I
get
remember
done?
queuing up at 6:30 a.m. outside the ticket window so that when the ticket window opens, we are able to get a reserved ticket. This was in the pre-online eras. So we also had these insights about, while growing up, what are the pain areas that train travelers faced. And some of them were still surprisingly still around. Those pain, even today, some of those pain areas are still around, which is accurately figuring out information along the journey. And a lot of this keeps changing. Platform numbers can change, and coach positions can change, and running status may not be as accurate on one platform or the other. So these problems have existed for the longest of times. It's just that no company got obsessed about solving them before we actually got into this space in 2013 and said, somebody's got to solve all the problems that a train traveler faces in order to build an experience that gives you peace of mind, right? And I'll talk more about peace of mind because in a way, travel is a category which is very different from any other e-commerce categories because you're selling an experience. You're not selling just a ticket, right? And I think that's the biggest mistake anyone can make looking at this category. We're not, at least us as a company, we do not see ourselves as a company that's established to sell tickets. We are selling peace of mind. That's what I keep telling our team, that look, we are in the peace of mind business. When people travel, they do not want to deal with the anxiety of things that can go wrong, things that change. It could be before or during or after the trip. It could be a flight cancellation. It could be a bus that did not turn up at all at the stop. We have to deal with these things as an OTA. Your job does not end or start even at selling that ticket, right? So, and I think that's what has set us apart, right? If you think about every category that Ixigo entered, we did not enter with the obsession to sell tickets, which was very different in terms of approach than any of our peers had at that point, right?
You spent some 4 years building a rail, a train travel app and experience and engagement without offering even transactions on, if I'm not mistaken, right? Forget monetization.
That's right. So if
Why?
you roll back even to 2007 when we launched as a flights meta search. We were not selling any tickets on flights.
Right, like, okay,
same
just
thing.
take us, because you've gone through, you launched as flight meta search and then you became OTA, then
And then we do the train utility app in 2013, which is largely solving these
sorry,
pain
Aloke,
areas.
I'm going to interrupt you and take you back right to the beginning. Since we are doing this transition thing, you and Rajneesh, both of you worked at Amadeus,
Yes, we worked at Amadeus in Europe.
which is a global giant that provides the software that everyone runs.
That's right.
When you started, if I'm not mistaken, both of you wanted to start something similar and you did that as well, right? Some sort of a B2B SaaS.
Actually, when we came back, we were toying with several models. We
Came back from the French Riviera. I must mention this, right?
From the French Riviera, we were living in a place which was between Nice and Cannes. So, we would watch the film festival live, and we would also be driving along the coast every summer. But we left that life, the good life, and came back because we got bored of the 35-hour work week. And there was this day when I went to office on a Saturday to finish something earlier than I had a deadline for, and I get called by my boss's boss on Monday saying, "What were you doing in office on Saturday?" And
You're
because
setting
this
the
was
wrong.
this was and as a 20 something year old, right, you actually want to give as much as possible in terms of time, energy to make your career grow. And this was counterintuitive. So when we looked at uh, our career graph from there, we felt that if we stick around and just keep doing this, we might end up being maybe some kind of manager in this company after a few years. But is it going to give us real satisfaction? And I think that's the point when also I was not very sure what I wanted to do next. So I actually go and apply to business schools and go to INSEAD for a year, because I'm still not 100% sure what I want to do next in life. I was very sure I did not want to live that life anymore. And of course, I sit through all the big four consulting interviews and I get dinged from all of them, and the feedback, after a lot of nudging, one of them gives me a feedback saying, "You cannot think straight." So, and I go back and start thinking, okay, what am I meant to do in life, right? And I
Sorry,
think
what
that
does
was,
that mean? Did you ever? I'm sure at some point you reflected on that. What does it mean that you cannot think straight?
I mean, you had these case studies, and you had to estimate things, and you needed to have structured thinking to crack
thinking.
those.
Thank you.
And this person believed that I did not have a very structured thinking about things. So go back.
Which actually today would look, if I look back at Ixigo, it's proven right, but it's proven right in the right way, because if you went about a structured manner, then you probably would have attacked the flight space and stuck with it, etc., and stuff like that. But sorry, I want to kind of take you, this thing of, there's a lot of founders that I've spoken to who seem to have this common thing of they started their careers in these really successful large global organizations, right, where prestigious organizations, work is good, you have a predictable line to getting promoted, making lots of money, staying abroad, etc. And all of them in some way, I think, like, whether it's Indian, whether it's outside, etc. I was looking at Harshil Mathur of Razorpay. He worked with Schlumberger. Anand Jain of CleverTap. He started he was actually interested in. So I'll bring to the other point as well. Manav Garg started, if I'm not mistaken, with Olam International in Singapore. Right. Tarun Mehta, he worked, if I'm not mistaken, again, Ashok Leyland or large companies, right? This is one strand where they work with these large companies, which on the face of it, you've landed your dream job. Why aren't you there? Second thing is that all of them at some level in their childhoods, like when I'm researching, they seem to have this thing, I got my first computer. I got exposed to computer magazines. I, went to the computer lab and started. So it's all, and it's the same with you as well.
Yeah, right? I think my first exposure to computers was in 1988. Actually, I was 8 years old. And in those days, my dad was posted in Kenya, and in our town, they had this new
Mombasa,
yes. So we had a new type of institute that had opened up very close to where we lived. It was called Bits and Bytes, and they would have this poster out there saying, "We'll teach your kids how to use computers." And they had the initial Macintosh, etc., installed there, and they were teaching kids Lego, the language, which was used back then. And then the people would be learning COBOL and Pascal and all that. But my dad sent me to a summer camp there. Just out of the blue, I said, this looks interesting. Can I do something here? So I went for a 2-month-long summer camp. And that changed, for me, like my perception of what computers were. And I was like, this is really cool, right? I want to spend more time learning this. There's a lot that can be done on a computer. So that was my first exposure. And then, of course, when I moved back to India, our family moved back in the 90s and grew up there. We fortunately in our school we had a computer lab, and I would spend also a lot of time there. Sometimes, my computer teacher was not very happy with me because I would ask him questions outside the syllabus, and he would sometimes even not know the answer. So it was very interesting. But that love for computers has been there throughout, and now that's love for anything new that comes out.
So the line that I'm essentially tracing, because
Yeah.
now I have the benefit of hindsight, is many people seem to have this love for something which is gets triggered in childhood, like usually computers, tinkering,
Yes.
hands-on creativity, which stays sort of sustained, goes through up and down periods, and at some point they end up joining so there is almost like you can see that when these people land up in large companies, at some point they are going to leave those large companies and go back to starting something
Because they
on
get
their own.
bored in predictable environments, right? Like if you have a tinkering mindset and you have a creative mindset, you will get bored in a process-driven 9 to 5 environment where you cannot step outside the box and do things, right? So
What
that's
led
what
you
happened.
and Rajneesh to decide that we're going to start something on our own? I did read that one of the roles was played by the movie Swadesh.
Yeah, so I was in B school when Swades came out, and
You were in Singapore.
I was in Singapore.
Yeah.
That's right. I watched Swades at least like 4 or 5 times, and that particular song which nudges you to go back, right? I've watched it multiple times. I think something inside me told me that this was the right moment, because any which ways after B school is one of the pivotal moments in everyone's career where you have to make a choice what you're doing next. And one of the choices was to move back to India, do something there, versus look for a job abroad. And even though I had a couple of job offers by the end of it,
How old
I
were you?
I was 25 when I was finishing INSEAD, and I happened to come back to Nice for a couple of days, and Rajneesh and I had coffee together, and I was like, we have two choices from here. We could
Two of you studied together at
the
IIT
two of
and were
us,
wingmates.
we were wingmates. We were also flatmates when we were working there together. But this I'm talking about when the year at INSEAD was over and I was in midst of figuring out what I'm doing next. We have coffee there together, and we were like, okay, we could either keep doing these boring corporate jobs for the rest of our lives and retire as a VP in some large company, or we could actually take a bet on ourselves, move back to India, do something in travel tech, which is what we understand. And we still didn't know what, but we were like, if we don't do it at the age of 25, when are we going to do it, right? Because this is the right time, and we have not sort of got any other liabilities on our head in terms of families, and we were not married by then, and also in terms of energy, right? We had enough energy to devote to this because we knew that this would take a lot of intense amount of time and energy, right? But when you're 25 and ambitious, right, you can take that leap of faith on yourself. What we didn't have was capital, because I had just taken a loan to pay off my B school, and that loan was not fully paid, and Rajneesh also was in some family debts, etc., which he still had to pay off. So at the time when we moved back to India in 2006, we both actually are not financially in the best of shapes, but we're very passionate about building something, right? And that's a very unique zone to be in, because
It's an
there's a lot of
outlier
uncertainty.
because one of the trends that I've seen is that as B school fees continue to grow and grow, more students are taking on loans to fund it. So as a result of which, for no fault of theirs, they become risk averse when they're coming out, because they're like, I need to first pay this back before. And therefore, those crucial period, like you said, when you come out of B school, when you can take a risk, they end up not taking a risk and then deferring it. And often that sort of becomes like a career in itself. What was it about in the two of you where you said that both of us are in debt, but we'll still take this chance?
I think we were just mad in hindsight. Like there's no
All
there's no logic to
All
it.
right, no capital, mad in hindsight, both with debt, coming back to India from the French Riviera and from Singapore. And what did you decide to start? What was the first business?
So
The first iteration of Ixigo?
we were toying with two ideas. One of them was to build like a GDS killer, or the next generation GDS, because we'd worked for Amadeus. So you always have some bias on things that you've done.
GDS is sort of like
GDS
this
is the
master
global
ticketing
distribution system. So these black and green screens that you had that used to sell airline tickets, and then once the internet came, people figured out, hey, you can actually use the browser to sell stuff. But essentially was built to distribute travel supply globally. So one of the ideas we were toying with was to build like a next generation GDS. The other idea was that online had just started to take off. There were 3 OTAs that had already raised money in India. In fact, 4. The Make My Trip folks had just moved back to India to focus on the market. They were focused on the US for a few years. Travel Guru, Yatra, Clear Trip, they had all raised money. The first Series A round was done. And so, we just felt that, hey, is online travel something we should look at? That's just getting started. Air Deccan was around. This is the time when aviation had just started to show signs of, fast growth, and the 99 rupees fares that Captain Gopinath was promoting, had really stimulated the market, right, in that sense. So we felt that perhaps, we should look at online. And internet was always like our first love, because both of us, even at Amadeus, were working on, web technologies. Like I was part of a team that actually wrote the first browser-based cruise booking engine for travel agents. And Rajneesh was also doing a lot of cool stuff on, how web can disrupt, that entire old green screen business. So in that sense, we started to look at what the internet plus travel plus India, equation could mean for us. And we realized that we did not want at that time to build yet another OTA, because a few of them had already raised that much capital, and we felt that we don't even know if, it's worth spending our time building a fifth OTA at that point, trying to do exactly the same thing. But we felt that, hey, the other model that was very interesting was meta search. There were these 1-year-old businesses, 2-year-old businesses like Kayak or Skyscanner, which had just started in US and Europe, which had started to, from a consumer perspective, look like the more disruptive model, because you could actually go and search and crawl multiple travel websites and find the best deals at one place. So the first model we took our bet on was saying, can we build a meta search for India, which can aggregate all the airline fares, all the OTA deals, etc., at one place. And that was the version we launched in June 2007. That was the first version of Ixigo. Yeah.
And that was fairly successful?
Well, I think...
if I'm not mistaken, with just through word of mouth, within the first 6 months itself, you had close to 100,000 people who signed up, etc.
Yeah, so the first version of Ixigo was launched from a DSL connection at our home.
With a 512
kbps pipe.
Right.
With DIN DNS pointing the DNS to that box, right? Saying, okay, this is just a launch, right? And we sent out emails to a bunch of friends saying, hey, we just launched this, check this out. We used to have Yahoo and Google Messenger back in those days, if you recollect. So yes. Google Hangout. So
the server was in your house, and with the 512 KB yes. pipe coming into that.
That's right. And with a DIN DNS pointing to it. It was, in hindsight, like the crappiest setup that you could do. But then we were a scrappy startup with limited resources. And, that's what we could fathom on day one. Send out this email blast to my friends. Rajneesh and I changed our status on Yahoo Messenger saying, check out ixigo.com. And that evening itself, the site crashed because, obviously we had not at all worked out that there would be thousands of people wanting to check it out at once. And a friend of mine who worked at Microsoft actually sent it on his corporate email group saying, check this out. So I think, it was, in that sense, a good problem to have. We immediately moved to proper hosting and
hosted
servers and figured out that we need to build something more stable. This is actually going to work. So, but yeah, I think we grew very rapidly by word of mouth. Within a few months, we had 100,000 plus monthly active users.
With zero marketing spend.
I think within 6 months, we were there with zero marketing spend. We didn't have any marketing dollars. Actually, we were living... In those days, Gurgaon was the cheapest place to rent an apartment in Delhi because it was just literally dumps of dirt, right, all around, and a few buildings being constructed. That was Gurgaon for you. This was 2006, 7, right? 7. So we find the cheapest apartment we can, and we are just renting that out and running the company from there. And then we realized that, look, we need to think of this more professionally, move to servers, even move to a small office and maybe hire 1 or 2 people, because we would need somebody to also run it.
Up till this
with
point,
us.
it's just the two of you.
Up till this point, it's the three of us. We had another co-founder who, dropped off along the way. But basically, the three of us were renting this apartment, writing code, or talking to. I was talking to airlines. The other two were writing code, and then just waking up, doing that, going to sleep. That was the routine every day. The computers were on the dining table in the center of the the apartment, and there were 3 rooms, and we would just come out of the room, sit on them, and then disappear
do you
back
have
in the rooms.
photos of back then?
Yes,
Or
I
you
do.
have? Okay, great. All right. But is it right that you tried to raise venture funding on the back of this initial viral success, and you spoke to a bunch of VCs,
Yeah.
and you couldn't manage to convince any of them? In fact, one of them apparently told you that you couldn't even raise $100,000 with this. Is this correct? And
That's right.
What happened?
That's
there?
right. So, see, you have to understand that this was a time when there were very few venture funds in India. If I recollect, probably 5 or 6 of them. And then there were a bunch of angel and seed, consortiums. But those also numbered, like you could count them on your fingers, right? So those 15 odd doors, we started knocking from the time we launched. Classic template. We'd read all these, books about Silicon Valley startups, and we'd, gotten inspired also by journeys of companies in the valley, whether it was Google or Facebook, etc., right, which was also getting started. And I think in that sense, we were clear that if you build something that people like and you start having organic traffic, usually people are able to find the money to support it, right? But we figured out that in India, it was just taking far longer than we imagined it would. And there were multiple meetings. One particular investor I would have met at least 5 or 6 times in a span of 7-8 months. But no real movement towards anything.
Why? Because I'm assuming that whatever your ask was could not have been some kind of nosebleed valuation or something like that. It would have been a reasonable bet.
These were days where you basically took what you got, right? So there was no, I don't think we had any reasonable or unreasonable ask. We were like, okay, we need some seed capital. I think we wanted like $500,000. We're not looking for a lot of money to get started. And, we were kind of flexible on what, in what shape and form that would come. And I think there were 2 things playing in people's heads. One is that it was already looking like a crowded space to some people, saying that, hey, there's 4 companies that have raised 5 to 10 million each already. What are you going to do that's so different, right? Second
Did
thing
you
was...
have that answer?
Well, people still ask me that, so it's okay. I've gotten used to it. But I think now we've hopefully proven that we are doing many things differently. But I think that question, by the way, inevitably is one of the reasons why the best of companies get rejected, right? So if you look at the founding journeys of the best of companies, whether it was Airbnb or it just, every space looks like a crowded space from the outside. And I think even though we were trying to say that, look, our model is different, we are Meta, we are not an OTA, and consumers love us. Here's the traction graph. Here's the we used to collect customer satisfaction scores. This was a desktop era of the internet, Rohin. So we did not have apps. This was just browser based interfaces. And essentially, what we were telling them is, hey, you are opening 5 browser windows and doing the same search over and over again. I'm saving you a lot of time and money both, right? And consumers actually were liking it. But the monetization model obviously was not well established. So we had gone and signed up a couple of airlines and shown that we can monetize this by click-based models or advertising-based models. But it was not a category in VC's minds which was well established. And unfortunately, yes, there is some herd mentality in the investing space. And unless you understand that this has worked elsewhere, will it work here? Those things. Even Kayak and Skyscanner were like very small businesses, right? Which people did not know whether Meta globally would actually work or not. So
Got
I
it.
think that was the biggest reason.
I have a follow-up question on this. Now, this has played out, like you rightly said, with some of the world's best companies. You see this threat kind of playing out where, I mean, some VCs actually have like a section where they say these are the ones that we missed, right, and we should not have.
Yeah.
So, if I were to go back to that point, from the VC's point of view, in many ways they were right to not get attracted by the meta search model.
Yeah.
Because you guys yourself would very quickly pivot away from meta search to becoming an OTA and a bunch of other things. So therefore the focus on the business model at that point in time, in some senses, was right. They didn't see.
Yeah.
But counterintuitively, what they should have probably seen is that you and Rajneesh would essentially do whatever it takes to continuously pivot the business to reflect it towards consumer preferences and trends and eventually make it successful.
I think it's easier to say this in hindsight.
Yes.
So that's the thing.
Could
So
you
I don't
predict it?
look.
How would you spot yourself at that point in time?
I've started doing some angel investing in the last few years, and also like I do mentor a few startups. And I think the why is the most important question, right? Why are the founders doing what they're doing, right? Are they chasing glory? Are they chasing money? Are they chasing a genuine passion that they're willing to bet everything in their life on, right? And I think that question is still a fundamental, is most important, at least in the early times, because when someone has started a company, that motivation needs to be very pure and clear, right? If you're not doing this, let's say you've launched a product or service, right? If you're not doing this out of the pure love for serving that customer of yours and making sure that the pain area you're solving is actually indeed solved in veracity, and that you're able to feel satisfied that you've changed somebody's life or created value for that customer, I think it's that test which most people do not apply, because we get carried away by metrics, we get carried away by numbers,
or the size of the market
size of the
opportunity.
I think spreadsheets are great, but spreadsheets never tell the story, right? Spreadsheets can only show you that the numbers that were promised are getting delivered or not, right? The real beauty of businesses lies outside the spreadsheets, right? And I get reminded of this because, a lot of VCs also, or investors, who are asking for, okay, what's the model, and how does this look like over? Actually, we'd not modeled our business very well in hindsight. Like, we'd not really built out a very detailed financial model. We built it because people asked for it. But we were like, we are solving a problem. A bunch of users think that this problem is worth solving, and we're getting traction, right? And if people believe there's a problem worth solving that we are not solving today, we'll go and solve it, right? But as long as you're passionate about identifying the pain areas and the problems, you're not going to give up till you've actually solved each and every problem that exists in that space.
How do you spot that? So you went back to 2007 and you're a VC who's trying to spot, do these two guys, Aloke and Rajneesh, have it in them? Can I bet on them? Because even though their current business model may not last, even though their current spreadsheet may not last, but what questions would you ask yourself?
Look, I think if I look at it from their perspective, I can understand now why it was so hard to place a bet on us, right? Because
but conversely, had someone made that bet, they would have made out.
I know, and some people did, right? And our first seed investor actually was an inbound call. So it's a very interesting story. This was late 2007, about October, November. We were running out of money, which we anyway were every month. But in the past few months, we'd managed to borrow from relatives, friends, what do you call, friends, families, and fools, right? So we'd done all that. And I think we'd reached a point where we were buying a printer for our office, and our office was literally like a 400 square feet, this kind of room, even smaller than this room probably. And we write a check to buy a printer. The next day I come to office and, one or two employees that we had are saying, hey, there's a man standing out and he's threatening us. I said, who is he? It was the guy who had sold the printer to us. His check had bounced, right? And he was like, I need my money. And that's the day we realized, hey, we are broke again, right? And this was after several discussions with several investors that had not been very fruitful. The next day we get an inbound call on, we had these fixed line phones back then. So we get an inbound call on the fixed line phone, and there's a European sounding guy at the other end saying, can I talk to the founder of Ixigo, the CEO? Can I talk to him? And I'm the one picking up the phone. I'm like, I am the CEO of Ixigo. And he says, I've been checking out your website and playing around with it. It's very neat. It works really fast. And, back in the days, we'd built a rich internet application with one page which loaded results in seconds when other OTAs were taking like 30, 40 seconds to load their results, because we were techies would super optimize that. We'd co-located with where the airline websites were actually hosted. So we'd done a lot of smart stuff there. But essentially, this person recognized that, right? This is something we'd been telling all the investors and saying, check it out, try it out yourself. But this person calls us inbound, says, I loved your website. I want to meet you guys. And I'm like, okay, I'll come and meet you where you're based. He said, I'm in Singapore. We check our bank account. We were broke. We couldn't pay for the printer, but there was some revenue coming in from some airline the next month. So we were like, okay, we can buy one ticket to Singapore. Both of us can't travel. So I go there to Singapore to pitch to William Klipgen. This is a Norwegian investor who had been tracking our journey. He had sold a meta search for e-commerce to Yahoo back in the days in 2004 for close to $500 million. And then moved to Singapore, become an investor. So he understood that space very well, and he understood the product tech quality very well. I pitched to him and his team. So he had 3 or 4 other partners, and I'm walking down. This is in a hotel meeting room, and then I'm walking down to the lobby, and he calls me and says, wait in the lobby for an hour. I'm waiting in the lobby for an hour. He comes down with a draft term sheet after that meeting. And I am actually at that moment, he's trying to walk me through certain terms. In my mind, I'm blanked out. I'm telling you, I didn't understand.
I can imagine.
You've seen those scenes in the films where, words are not registering in your mind. It was happening to me. And I was just nodding. I was like, okay. Right. And I literally went back to India and told the team that, hey, we're going to get funding finally, it looks like. But obviously we had so many disappointments that till the money didn't hit the bank, you were not. But the money did hit the bank. In February 2008, we raised our seed round from BF Spectrum, which was the fund based out of Singapore. That moment, I think for us was, if you watch The Pursuit of Happiness and you see at the end when he's given up all hope and he actually gets the job, it was that moment for us, right? Because we were down to the wire in motivation, in money and everything. But, users had continued growing. Everything was going great, right? And revenue was also slowly trickling up, but it was a very small trickle, right? It couldn't pay more than our server bills at that point. So I think what we learned from that was that, sometimes you have to not give up and keep going, right? And this is also the time where we had already lost one co-founder along the way, because, everybody has different levels of resilience in this. So it was, I think, a pivotal moment in our journey when that happened. Yeah.
You also managed to raise some money from some of your INSEAD professors?
Yes, I did.
Was that the same trip?
This was afterwards, actually. So we had, before this, when the printer incident happened, a friend of mine from INSEAD who was my classmate, the next day I asked him to wire some money. So we had an angel who was my friend. And then post this round, when the GFC crisis hit, and that's a story in itself, is when we again tapped into some more angels to help us out during the 2009 time when there was hardly any capital out there. And we did a bridge round where one of my professors and the dean of INSEAD Singapore campus both invested in that one. Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
To just very quickly switch back, because we started this journey to discuss the evolution of Ixigo and his business model. So you started by being a meta search,
right?
Out of which how long were you a meta search before you pivoted to being a full-blown OTA?
Well, we became a full-blown OTA in end of 2019. So we were on the flight side, we were almost for 12 years a meta search. Although in the interim, we moved to something called Meta Book, where you could actually book on us, but on our partners, right? So it was a platform that
So it
allowed,
was like an
facilitated.
intermediate step between
Yes.
being meta
So
search
I
and
think that
OTA.
intermediate step started around 2017, and so for about 2.5 years we were a meta book, and then became an OTA completely end of 2019.
And then today, if I look at Ixigo,
Yeah.
the majority of your strongest market segment is the train booking segment, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
Followed by bus, followed by airlines, and then hotels. What were those other? When did those? Now I understand this part, like where you both come from. Amadeus, you're like, we need to start a travel company. Let's start meta search. Here are businesses like Kayak, etc., which we can. There's no such business in India. Let's start it. You run with it. At what point do you start looking at trains and buses, and what causes it?
Right. So this was around 2012-13 when mobile internet had just started to take off in India. Because remember, before that, it was just the desktop era, and meta search was the most consumer friendly model in that era. Trains as a category, I think India is very unique, because if you look at 23 million people traveling every day today by a train, out of which 2.5 would be reserved and the rest would be unreserved, it's an order of magnitude bigger than any other mode of transport in the country, right? It's actually, in a sense, the bloodline of the country, the arteries and veins of the country, right? In that, and for an average middle class Indian, or we call Bharat, or whether you call it next billion users from tier 2, 3, 4 towns, or emerging middle class, people call it India 2, India 3. In that segment, it's not just the dominant mode of transport. For many Indians, it's the only mode of transport which they can afford, which is also close to them. So in villages, in small towns, there is no other way you can travel to any other town. It's only trains. And therefore, it just seemed like the most obvious segment to go after. In fact, when we were looking at Google search data, we saw that the most dominant queries and rising queries were all related to train related information, whether it was a PNR status check or a running status check, or just information about train schedules and routes. And Android had just come around, and we said, why is there no train related app on Android yet that actually provides all this information at one place? And it was at this moment where we said that maybe it's time to create a small team within our team. And by that time, we were more sizable. If I recollect, we were probably 60, 70 people, if not more. But basically said, why not 4 or 5 people go into a room, and Rajneesh and 4 engineers actually go into a room, and they literally lock themselves in for a few months, saying, we're going to come out with something that makes sense for train travelers, right? Like, which essentially solves their problems, and also experiment with multiple ideas. So they actually came out with 3 or 4 apps. And the train app in the current avatar was the precursor of that, was one of them, where all it did was it would pick up a PNR that you had booked on IRCTC from your SMS inbox. It would, with permission, obviously, start checking whether the waitlist was moving. And once we had enough data, we would start predicting whether that PNR would confirm or not. So if you had a waitlist number 118 on a Punjab Mail third AC ticket from, let's say Delhi to Ludhiana, would we be able to predict that, yes, you will get that ticket, was a function of how much data we had. And there was a lot of data out there which was
I
on
wanted to
blogs.
ask, how are you getting this information? Because unlike airlines and other spaces, buses, etc., the difference is Indian Railways is run by one organization.
That's right.
There's only one seller, there's only one supplier. So the precursor to all of this is that you could only buy tickets from Indian Railways, right? And the only way to check status was through Indian Railways. So if somebody enters a PNR on the first version of the app that you built, where are you folks getting this? Is it coming from IRCTC? Did they have APIs back then that you
back
could hit?
Back then, this information was only on the Indian Railways website, right? And people would have to go there and type it in every time and check it again and again.
Right.
And all we built was what today people would call a more agentic way of doing it, right? Which was basically we would go and do it for you and show you whether it has moved or not. There was also information on certain blogs where experts would come and say, soothsayers almost saying कि आपका confirm हो जाएगा या नहीं होगा, right? Because because they would travel every day on that route and they had a lot of prior knowledge about whether a waitlist number would confirm or not. But the problem with that was it was not very data led, and in fact on festivals those logics would fail, on weekends it would fail. So we said this is a classical data science problem, right? It's a machine learning problem. And initially we did not have the prediction model. We only had the ability to check the status
Actual
and
lookup.
alert you. So we would just check the status and alert you with a nice notification saying your ticket is confirmed, because that anxiety would make you go and check 10 times a day. We would say, don't worry, we are doing it for you. We will just inform you. As we started getting enough data over time, we started having conviction to predict. So I think the prediction model only comes about a year later, year and a half later, once we have like millions of PNRs already mined, where we are able to say, okay, now with a high degree of certainty, I can call this as a 80% chance of confirmation or a 90% chance of confirmation. Now, that model also keeps getting better over time as you have more and more data, because it's a self-sustaining moat in that sense. But it also started becoming obvious to us that this was not the only problem train travelers had. People started, in fact, then going on Play Store, requesting new features or giving us feedback on this, whether it was coach positions, platform numbers, waking you up before a station arrives, because in India, the delays can be very dynamic. So setting a time-based alarm doesn't work. It has to be a location-based alarm. All those problems we started solving one by one. Almost 20 of those feature sets we added over the next 3 years. The most important one being running status, because if you're traveling in a train in India and you're catching a nap, the moment you wake up, the question you're going to ask your co-passenger
Where
is,
are we right now?
Where are we right now? Kahan pahunchi? Right? And so when we traveled in trains, we realized this is the most liquid use case in the whole country, because everybody traveling on this coach is going to ask that. Sometimes even the people sitting there would not know, because outer पे खड़ी है, वो कहाँ खड़ी है, कितनी देर खड़ी रहेगी, आगे की ट्रेन चली कि नहीं. Those were questions everybody was asking and talking about. But nobody had the data visibility on it. And honestly, the official platform also was more a control system driven platform where, it would trigger along the track at certain places and then update the website. It was not as real time as what people expected it to be. So we said we should use the location of our own users with permission to tell others where the train was, similar to how Google Maps is doing it for traffic. And because we had the liquidity, because we had these millions of PNRs coming in, and we had enough people that we knew with confidence, because if I have their PNR, I know that they're sitting in the train right now, right? So I can just request them to share the location and share it with others. And it just became this whole altruistic network where people were willing to do that to help others because they knew others would help them. That's how we got started, but we ran into a bottleneck, which was internet wouldn't work along the tracks very well. GPS also on certain sections of the track would not work. And we solved it in a very unique way. We started looking at the cell tower IDs of all the cell towers we saw along the track and created this proprietary database of all the cell towers, which we could reverse look up.
Oh, interesting.
In
so
real
you see a
time.
ping to one cell tower and then the ping after some time to the next cell
So
tower.
even if you don't
then
have internet,
you can
That's right.
extrapolate some kind of speed and
That's
location
right.
and all that.
So we started using that to reverse look up the locations. And it was magical because now you could just be offline. So you could go in offline mode and still see where the train was, right? And that worked like magic, right? And I think it was a very hard piece of technology. I think only us and one other startup, which finally Google acquired them, 2 companies in India actually cracked that, because you need immense amount of data and you also need immense amount of algorithmic logic behind the scenes, because using those data points in a smart way to predict also whether the train will catch up or not based on prior days information, prior 7 days information, but also how's the train in front actually behaving? Is that actually running delayed, or has that caught up? So we see all these inputs, combine them to give a very smart running status. This we launched around 2015, and it unlocked the next wave of growth because it was just magical, right? Like if you used it, you would go and tell 10 other people about it, and the app just took off to it. We went from doing millions of downloads a year to millions of downloads a month within the next 2 years. That was our graph. And this was where 2017, 2016, 17, when we raised our next round also, we started getting inbound attention because we were just, from a usage perspective, exploding right at that point.
So that's the trains element. The other strong element to your business is the bus element.
Yes.
Was that sort of like some kind of like a strategy map analysis saying that, look, if you're looking at where people travel, it's not airlines, it's a minority. We've covered trains. What next? Buses. Let's go after buses. Or was it something else which was serendipitous?
Well, actually, it was two things. One is that if you look at where the constraints in the travel ecosystem are the least, right? Demand has always been very strong in India. On trains, almost 30% of tickets that we sell are waitlisted tickets, right? In fact, that's been the case for many, many years in the country because demand is more than supply on reserved. Even on flights, we don't have enough capacity, and we always complain about airfares. But the fact is that we could absorb a lot more capacity if Airbus and Boeing were to supply enough planes, and the airlines would be happy to take early deliveries and deploy them.
And if there were enough pilots, we must say that right now.
At this moment of time, yes, I think that's a situation which we'll come back to. But basically, India has always been a supply-constrained market when it comes to travel. But if you look at buses, that's the only part of the industry where these supply constraints have not been around. If I'm a bus operator, deploying a new top-end Volvo bus is a 1 crore type investment, right? And it can be actually procured within a matter of a week or two. I don't have to wait for months or years for a delivery, right? And the highways, the expressways, the way they have changed and evolved, and we now have 4-lane, 8-lane connectivity for many of our cities. I think that has just caused massive explosion in both supply and demand, right, in that sense. But if I go back to when we got excited about buses, it was for two reasons. One is when people were waitlisted on trains, and if the distance was, let's say, less than 600 kilometers, bus was the only second choice.
So bus becomes sort of like your plan B.
Absolutely. So the catchment area of people who book buses actually starts from people who get waitlisted on trains. That was the insight that we saw from the data.
Yeah, because when you mentioned that 30% of people book waitlisted tickets, I was actually in my mind thinking, wow, there must not be any other country in the world where such a popular mode of travel has 30% of people buying a ticket, which they probably will not get, but they're still going ahead with it. And then I was thinking, what can you do with those 30% people?
Yeah, so it's spillover demand essentially. And bus is the most obvious place where this spillover demand will consummate, at least for medium distance. Long distance, actually, even air becomes a substitute as long as you can afford it. So if you're a third AC or second AC customer, you might stretch and buy an air ticket. And we are seeing, in fact, one big reason for our ahead of the industry growth on air in the last few years is also because we have this massive catchment area from both trains and buses, where for longer distance, people will come and also see, okay, what is the flight worth and how much time will I save there? Is it worth stretching and paying for that? And obviously, on certain sectors, the arbitrage can only be 2x, 3x, or 4x of the ticket value. And of course, the very popular and long distance sectors, the price difference could be even 5x, 6x. But whenever we see like a 2x or 3x price delta, there is a subset of people who are willing to sort of move up the value chain. The other thing that happens is on buses, there are last mile connectivities in the country where bus is the only way to reach. So when we looked at our train user base and we started asking people where their ultimate destination was, we discovered that for many of them, it was not that station. They would then take a bus to reach, let's say, a Manali, or it could be a hill station town. It could be a village, right, which is another 1 or 2 hour ride away from that city. And that led us to conclude that, that is a very strong last mile leg in the country for access to the smallest of towns. And we need to have that. So initially there also we were a meta. for a few years, like
I'm assuming
almost for
by
3-4
this
years.
time Red Bus
Red
was
Bus,
there.
Abhibus, Travel Yari, there were a bunch of players at that time. So we tied up with them to begin with. But then we acquired Abhibus in 2021. And that is how we became a bus OTA. So train OTA...
Was that, did you direct enter the space through a direct acquisition? Did you
Yes.
ever have any players or platforms of your own before that? In the bus space?
We were not doing bus OTA ourselves. We became a bus OTA after the Abhibus acquisition in 2021. So just a reminder, like train OTA we became in 2017, November 2017, flight OTA end of 2019, bus OTA after the Abhibus acquisition. So it was only in end of 2021 that we become a full-blown OTA in that sense, right? So I think that journey took about 14 years to go from initiation to becoming a full-blown OTA.
Got it. If you've been a long-time listener to this podcast and are glad we're back, do tell the world by sharing this episode with everyone you think will find it valuable. Produced by Udantika Kashyap and mixed and mastered by the wonderful Rajiv CN, our resident sound engineer. This is me, Rohin Dharmakumar, signing off. We'll be back soon with another episode.